what it is and what aggression is and what it isn't. And okay, so in theory it sounded great, but in practical application I suddenly went, I don't know what aggression is and isn't. So you guys are going to help me figure out, we're all going to figure this out together. That's my plan. What do you interpret from this dog based on the photograph?
Alertness.
He's alert?
Observing.
I heard cautious. I heard observing. He's watching something. Is he dangerous?
He's ready. He's assessing.
He's assessing. Is he dangerous? Would you go up and pet him?
No.
Why not?
First of all, his breed and he's in his fence.
We're not allowed to do the breed bias thing here. Although I'm sure I will at some point. But what was the second thing you said?
He's in his fence.
He's in his fence.
He's very stiff. It's closed mouth.
He's stiff. He's closed mouth. So he again is tense, right? He's tense. He's focused. He's focused on something.
Somebody said he's old, so he's practiced his behavior more than once.
It could be just the light hitting, the overexposure of the camera. I don't think he was old. We've already alluded to the fact that aggression, there's a lot of overlap in terms of aggression and other behavior systems, play being the most obvious. So sometimes it's a real challenge to look at dogs and decide, are they playing, are they not playing? Is it play that could escalate into something more aggressive? Sometimes that can be a very challenging scenario. Then there's overlap with aggression and courtship. Oftentimes the females can be quite aggressive with the males. But in that context, the male ideally does not react aggressively back. That they are much more tolerant of aggressive threats in that context. Looking at the science of it, I want to give you kind of an overview of what we know about a variety of different species, and then specifically what we know about dogs. So first of all, one of the things that's very surprising when you start to look into it is that the vast majority of animal species, mammals included, in the wild are solitary. They don't live in groups. They come together just to mate. But there are a handful of species that are social. And within that group, you can see very different levels of sociality. One of the things that is very obvious, no matter what group of wolves you're studying, is that they have a very extensive language of ritualized displays, much more so than our dogs. So you see ritualized displays to varying degrees in the whole range of social species, probably with spotted hyenas being the supreme example of having a variety of rich displays. But wolves, too, are very communicative in their displays. They have a variety of dominant and submissive postures that exist solely to convey information about social status. And the argument is that these displays are needed for a couple of reasons. There needs to be periodic reinforcement of the structure so that aggression is minimized. And that's especially the case if you have a new individual in the group, or if there's been recent upheaval in the group where things have changed. So we have these kinds of investigations, which, I mean, obviously my examples are not scientific, but they're based on simulations of scientific work. The other thing that I wanted to do was look at a more rigorous competitive feeding situation between dogs. And actually this is why I was doing the bone tests, because the dogs I did the bone test with were also participants in the study. So I needed an external indication of who would be able to access resources. So what I did in this particular study is I had this room where there are these buckets, and all the buckets have screens on them, and rocks on them. And if you see the dark stuff in the underneath, that's food, and that's so that all the buckets will smell like food. Okay? However, depending on the scenario that I'm doing, there might also be food on top of the screen. But only some buckets will have food. Other buckets will not have food. What do we know about dogs in the shelter? There are some studies that suggest that, that behavior problems in general are the primary reason why dogs end up in shelters. And when we look at reasons for dogs being relinquished, behavior reasons rank up there as one of the reasons that people give. And then again, we know that they're not always honest about reporting everything as well. And then when we look at dogs being euthanized for behavior problems, the number one reason, not surprisingly, is aggression. Obviously common in the shelter environment. And I've got a bunch of different cases to share with you here. I'm a little worried about time, but I'm going to show you the first one, which is not a shelter, well, she's a shelter dog. This would be your post-adoption follow-up support in this case, because it's example of Fidget, my dog who came from the shelter, and her behavior. But it's a demonstration of a basic desensitization and counter-conditioning procedure with dogs. Oh, I forgot about this slide. So this kind of lists a variety of options that you have when dealing with dogs that are aggressive towards other dogs. Remedial socialization / play therapy. I'm not going to focus on that, although I have a couple of examples of using it. Amy Sadler here is the one to ask about how to do this kind of treatment approach. Desensitization and counter-conditioning, and then I have that plus, as in the Click to Calm Emma Parsons procedure, which is basically desensitization and counter-conditioning with some operant training thrown in. So the dog, you're installing alternative behaviors. Abandonment training, I'm going to talk about that very briefly with a demonstration of what it involves, but it's not terribly practical in the shelter environment in most situations. Positive punishment is a possibility depending on the circumstances. And then if you're up on your lingo, the cat and the bat, the constructional aggression treatment, and the behavior adjustment therapy, right? Yay.